All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. It's 7 after, so we're starting a little later than usual, but that's okay. For those who don't know, I'm Cassandra Ferris. I am the community manager here at SaltStack. I see at least one person who I don't think I've seen in the open hours before, but what these are is a weekly community conversation. We will give you updates on what's happening with SALT, with releases, and then community members can propose different topics, or if there aren't any topics proposed, we will look at kind of what some frequently asked conversations and questions are and talk about those in the open hour. So today, once we get to it, that topic will be the contributor guide. Coming up next week, we're going to have an open hour that focuses on release frequently asked questions. And then the following week, we're going to talk a little bit about work groups and how those are going to evolve. So agenda today, we're going to do some news and updates, give you some updates on kind of SALT itself, some events and things, updates on the sodium point release. I'm going to do a recap of the PR jam that we had, and then we're going to talk through, for most of this time, we're going to talk about the contributor guide and the documentation and just how to make it easier for new contributors to join SALT. So with that, stop my screen share. And there aren't a whole ton of updates this time around as far as events go. The most recent meetup was Wednesday the 5th. That was yesterday. We did that for the European group. I will be posting meetup videos by the end of next week. And then right now I don't have any speakers lined up for the next few weeks worth of meetup. So always looking for speakers. You can talk about what you're doing with SALT on side projects. We're open to kind of general SecOps and DevOps type topics as well. So if you'd like to speak at a meetup, let me know. If we have multiple people that want to speak on the same topic, we can put together a panel. So that's where we are on that. I do know that we have, I think Tom Hatch is speaking at Black Hat Conference this week, which is kind of exciting. So our social media team's sharing a lot of that information. And the only other new thing is that we're now doing, there are a lot of questions about triage and about how we prioritize things. And we are now doing a Twitch stream on triage on Tuesdays at noon Eastern. So that's something that's been added to our Twitch schedule. All that stuff is on the community events calendar. That Sage is going to give us some updates on what's happening in the point release. And go.
All right, so the point releases today, we will be releasing today by 3 p.m. Mountain. I actually don't have it in front of me what that is, UTC. Cassandra, do you know what that is, UTC?
9 p.m.
Cool. I know that's a little later than usual. Sorry about that. We've just had some resourcing issues there. And so getting that done today, and you'll see that come out. We will do the regular announcements, and you'll see those come out as well. And the point release has been a little bit hairy. So just to go over, we found very late in the testing cycle a problem where the SALT API was not starting. So we went to go fix that, and still during testing of the fix of that, we found another small issue that we needed to fix as well that needed to get tested and merged in. So that took us longer than expected. We have been working towards testing packages prior to releases and doing more testing on packages prior to releases. And that's actually a big initiative for the next release cycle. And as Megan is coming back on board from a leave, we're so excited that Megan is back, and she's going to help us with that, as well as Kirill. And we're going to be addressing that because we know that that's a problem, and we hope to see some good improvement there, although it did still affect us this time. So just to give that update, are there any questions, comments?
What are some highlights of what's included in the release?
Well, it's a bug fix release, so the highlights are that we fixed bugs. We attempted to fix quite a few Python 3 issues, as we saw some of those come in very early on. Right after the sodium release, we also tried to get quite a few things fixed that we had started calling them SALT call issues because we weren't sure what they were. And some of those did not get fixed and will fall into magnesium because we just didn't know what they were, but we did attempt to fix those as well. But it is a bug fix release. Yeah, if no other questions, I guess we can move on.
Yeah, and back to the point of the delays. in the release cycle. I did post this in Slack, but moving forward, anytime there is changes to release dates, we'll be posting explanations. The same day we post that date change, that was a piece of feedback that was
Yes.
heard and heard loudly and put into the communication process. So
Yeah, I think we're even going to come up with a template so that we're ready to go and
yep.
we communicate all the necessary information up front and have it go out with those changes. So hopefully we're doing that less and less, but yes, we're going to add that to our communication process. Thank you for that feedback.
Yes. All right. Next up, we are going to recap the PR Merge Jam. I know that some people were there and would have seen these, well, yeah, would have seen these slides, but I want to kind of go back over everything because this was something that we tried to do in the last release and we had the CVE come up and we weren't able to address it, but the idea was to basically work on this backlog of PRs, get everything ported. We set out with certain goals for attendance and number of PRs, and we far exceeded those goals. So this is our support team. I'd just like to thank everybody who helped out. We kind of took shifts and people took different shifts to support people's PR questions. And in between, we had a lot of little like chit-chatty moments where we talked about travel, we talked about productivity tips, we just little conversations arose, which was really cool to see. These were the topics that we had. We had lightning talks at the end of the PR Jam as well as a retro. That stuff will be posted online. And then these are the stats I want to go over. So we started with about 1,000 PRs that needed to be ported. And as part of the last release, we boiled that down to about 250. We were hoping to take care of another 50 during the PR Jam, and we wound up going far beyond that. So average number of participants was 15 people, and that was fairly evenly split between SALT Core team members and our community contributors. One really cool thing that I saw is that every day we had one person, a different person every day who was new, a new contributor to SALT, hadn't joined us before, hadn't been involved. And so that was a really cool thing to see new people coming on and wanting to help participate. I hung out on Zoom for about 26 hours and Twitch for about 20 hours, and we ported a total number of 123 PRs. So, like I said, we set out for 50. We'd done 51 within the first day, and we went a lot farther than that. So thank you to everybody who participated in that. If you did participate, message me your email address. We have some SALT Stack goodies to send you. And then we will be doing these probably on a fairly regular basis. I haven't decided if it's per release or twice a year, but we will be doing future PR jams and just kind of a way to set aside dedicated time for everybody to work together on that sort of event. Does anybody have anything else to add about the PR jam?
I just posted your email address in the chat just so everybody has it. And
Or
of
DM me on
course,
Slack.
yep. And of course, there is our distribution email that will come to most of us, core@saltstack.com as well. Love to hear from you guys. That was, it was a fantastic jam, and I am very excited to do some more of those and do them broader instead of just porting PRs to master, which is a little bit, it's less fun. So, but we did sort of like, you know, we ate the elephant one bite at a time, and we're taking some big chunks and getting it done. And that was great. And it was great to do it with the community. We did have some just fantastic conversations about all kinds of things. And it was great to get to know all of you that attended. And I look forward to doing them again.
Yeah. And semi-related note to that, we are going to be doing a documentation jam as well. That's in progress. We were targeting a mid-September date. We're moving that to October just because of some other priorities that have shifted. But the documentation working group meets after this open hour, so we'll be hammering at some of those details. And I did see a question in Slack. Somebody asked, when will the brand new shiny wiki come out?
The brand new shiny wiki.
Well, I'm not sure if they're asking like, well, it just says brand new shiny wiki when. So I'm not sure if they're asking when it's going to be out or when things are going to be posted on it.
Oh, yeah.
But the community wiki is going to become, right now we kind of have two sources of information. You have the SaltStack community site and the wiki. And the wiki is where you're going to go for a lot of documentation, notes from these open hours, release news, a lot of things going forward. Um, I'd like to, by the end of the magnesium release, have that organized. Okay, yeah, I made a comment that the wiki could do with showing more focused content as a launching point, and we can use those pages as titles for Slack channels. Yeah, that's the type of thing that we need to do with the wiki, because right now it's just kind of chaos.
Oh,
So,
to customize some of that. Yeah.
yeah, because right now it's just one list of all sorts of stuff, and I think it needs to be broken down
Sure.
by pages that make sense. So I need to
Yep.
do some research into how to organize GitHub wikis.
Yeah, they've got some good documentation on that, and I've seen some other things done, and I think that we've talked about it a little bit. It hasn't come up as a high priority, but I do think that it needs to be done, and I think that it's just great. We don't have a time frame on that. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Cassandra?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to have it done by the end of magnesium, like as part of, because we
So
have the
end of October.
deliverables. Yeah, because we have the release deliverable that it's just supposed to be easier for contributors to find the information they need. We want a formal contributor guide, and I think the wiki ties into some of that, finding the information you need. Which isn't a bad transition point to let's talk about documentation and the contributor guide.
Yeah, just really quickly, I wanted to mention, and Derek, I see that you're on, and if you want to add anything to this, the Docs Jam that we're planning is the focus will be, we would love to see some use case examples. I think this is the focus still, correct me if I'm wrong. We want to see some use case examples really detailed on modules. And modules that people are using, that they use every day, that we could really focus some documentation around that. We have some, and we're looking for more. So it's got a really specific focus, and I think that makes it fun, and that makes it really exciting to be like, oh, hey, I use this thing, and I use it every day, and it helps me in this way. We would love to hear those stories. We would love to get that documented, and so I think it's going to be an exciting Doc Jam.
Yeah, totally on this. We wanted to kind of look at that, and so that we'd be able to kind of say, hey, this is how you can contribute to the doc strings within modules, because that's what ultimately gets rendered into that documentation on our doc site. And we were also going to, I think we have documentation issues that might have good first issue labels on them, so that if people wanted to contribute, maybe they hadn't contributed before and wanted to see if something that might be a little bit of a lower, because maybe they aren't necessarily sure what to contribute to, or maybe they've just always seen something in docs that they've ignored because it's been an issue or a problem. That because we'll even open issues if there's, hey, this piece of documentation is incorrect, and usually some people mention this, but it hasn't been fixed. And if we don't have an issue for it, we might be totally unaware. So anything from opening brand new issues related to our documentation, improving the doc strings and modules so that there's use cases for, hey, this is how you can use the Kubernetes module for something because that's what we use it for, and same with first issues. Yeah, it's kind of the broad overview, I think, of what we're planning.
Yeah.
We did have a comment from Twitch related to this. Plinkable said this week he's seen several comments about places documentation isn't clear, it isn't detailed enough. Pillar usage is at the top of that use list, specifically when not to use it, what the alternatives are, and clear examples. So that's exactly the type of,
yeah,
that's specific enough. It tells us what an area of documentation we can prove. That's the type of thing that we need to know.
Yes, thank you. That's excellent. And I think that something that I don't see it a ton, we do it a little bit, but that where you say like not to use it, like this isn't necessarily meant to be used in this case. I think that's fabulous information to have and feedback, and thank you. Thank you for saying that, because I think that there are times that it's that specific, and we would love to get that documented and make that part of how that works in the doc strings.
Yeah, and I think in relation to like the pillar options, if there are certain aspects of it too that kind of come to mind in the documentation channel of the SaltStack community Slack, I have a link to an open issue on that Alan Kugler had opened related to the pillar ops configuration stuff and how he was saying, hey, we need clarification on this, which could be totally related to what was being asked about. And if people are aware of feedback or items that they think should be considered in that issue, definitely take a look at that. And I'll also put it in the Zoom call chat, but both that documentation channel in there. And so if you want to get part of that conversation or add certain items on things that should be reviewed and fixed in that particular documentation, definitely go for it.
What are some other areas or types of documentation that people think we should improve on? I think getting started is one, but
Getting started guide, yeah. So this may lead us into another agenda item, which might be next, which is the contributing guide. And I think that we have a lot to update there. We kind of have it in a lot of places. We have a lot of different files that we're using, and we'd like to make those match, and we'd make one source of truth and make it dynamic so that that's being updated everywhere. And we are actually working on that this release cycle. That's one of our initiatives. Derek is at the helm of that, and we're working really closely with Cassandra to also make sure that she's really aware of some of the changes that we're going to make and make that really clean. I think that organically that has just grown, and we're now at a size that we need to really go back and address that and make sure those match better and use some really cool items that are available to us to make that really great. And so some of the things that we're just looking at is to cross-reference what we have today. I think there's 5 different things that we're cross-referencing now that sort of match. So the hacking, the contributing RSC, as well as the HTML and the MD file, those are all just a little bit different, and they should probably match, and they should have a source of truth and get updated dynamically, and instead of updating them individually. And so we're kind of looking at that, and we're still really in planning phase, so I can't really tell you exactly how that's gonna pan out. But just looking at how many pieces we have where we say some of the same things, also the frequently asked questions should probably match up. And we're actually excited to get started on that one. I think there's a lot to do there, but we're going to make the focus pretty small and the scope pretty small for this release, and then hope to just iterate on that and make that available also to the community to help us with that. Maybe even do a doc jam around that, and do a doc jam around like the getting started guide, so that those are also matching up and referencing each other appropriately. And I am super excited about that one. How about you, Derek?
Yeah, and for people who are also interested in the docs in general too, we do have the docs working group that I believe is after this today, but which is every 2 weeks or so, I think, at the moment. And if you'd like to get involved, definitely attend. And otherwise too, there's that documentation channel in the community Slack too for helping bring things onto the radar. And but yeah, that contributing guide is going to be interesting to look at with all those different pages of reference. I don't know from time availability, it's going to be kind of interesting this release cycle, but I'm doing everything I can, and the working group will be also talking about what we can do, not necessarily just related to things like the contributing guide, but other stuff too.
yeah,
Yep.
right now we're doing, like I saw the links you sent me about like Red Hat and some other places contributing guides, which funny enough, I already had those bookmarked. Have been doing kind of some research on how different places contributor guides look, how those things are structured, so we can kind of borrow from here and there. So there's kind of 2 preparation steps, and one is like, how does the contributor guide look? And the other is what content needs to be included and how do we prioritize that?
So one question that came up during the test clinic was actually around the man pages in particular. At least my understanding is that we kind of update those as part of our release process, and they shouldn't be updated on PRs. And so because of that, is there any particular reason that we actually have those stored in the SaltStack repo versus just building them when we build things that want a man page?
That's a great question. You know, I haven't thought about that. Maybe somebody with some legacy information knows, or Derek, yeah.
No, because I've actually had the same question, because I think my first PR to the repo, I was doing a bunch of links, updating to links that were broken. And so I was grepping through, and I happened to also then contribute to try to change what was in the man page files. And they're like, no, you don't touch those. Actually, those are the files we never contribute to in this repo. And I'm like, why are they here then? It's like an untouchable source. And it's like, well, it's not necessarily source, it's actually build output. And so, yeah, I don't really know the history, and I'd like to also know kind of what how that's done, or kind of what the strategy around it is.
Yeah, Megan or David or Gareth, Pedro. I don't know if you guys know. I've wondered this and thought maybe it was just something legacy, but I don't know. I don't actually have an answer. The man pages that they're we only change those on build for a release, and then instead of having them, I guess where we are right now, maybe they would be as part of a CI process, and so not in the repo.
About 5 years ago at this point, we used to build the docs as well. There was a number of issues with building with Sphinx, and depending which version of Sphinx was getting used. And it was decided that there would be one source of all documentation, and that would be the docs themselves, the docs repo, rather than what was actually in the code, and leave the repo builds just for the code and not for the documentation. And that people, if they want the docs, they should go to our web page and doc source. And that was the documentation person at the time made that decision. And it's been that way since. It makes it easier because if you're building the docs in all different versions of platforms, we ran into all different versions of Sphinx that we had to adjust or accommodate for, and people wanting to use the latest things in Sphinx. And you're still building for old things like Debian 7 Wheezy, which wouldn't have had all the most up-to-date version of Sphinx, and you kept running into loads of issues that way. And so for the documentation, which wasn't related to making the code actually work and perform, it was easier to have it all in one space and use modern tools that weren't so dependent on and getting hassled by older versions of OSs that we had to support. And it's just been that way since.
David, do you know what the history around the man pages stuff is when it comes to the non-Sphinx documentation, but how that man page stuff is generated? And
I'd have to go back and dig in. I don't have it off the top of my head.
That's it.
My brain cache is flushed to other projects.
Sure. I think that it's probably a good thing to take down and go back and give a better answer, I guess, because I'm not even sure. Derek, do you want to just take? Okay, go ahead, Megan.
I know that we build them every release, and you'll see the PR every release with the man pages updated. I'm trying to think of a reason not to take those out, and I don't see one, so I don't see why we can't just add that to our CI/CD process when we build out packages. So the answer is I don't think there is a reason.
I gotcha. Yep. I will taken action to find out more detail and to see if that can be moved as a possibility. So great conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Good to know.
Yeah, really quickly, I just wanted to answer contributing the use cases. We haven't actually decided anything just yet. We're going to talk about that in the next hour with the docs working group. And so we should have some more information about how to get those use cases to us for that doc jam. And we'll communicate that out. Sorry, I don't have anything today. We're excited about it. And so just kind of giving you a preview and tell you what we're doing, but we should have some more details soon.
A suggestion or comment in the chat.
Yeah, so we used to use the wiki, and I think that we started going with Sphinx because our documentation is more extensive. I think that's kind of the short version. And to address getting that, to get it to users more easily, we used to build that more frequently, and we're actually looking at getting back to that and doing some different things there. But using some more modern versions of Sphinx instead of where we were, and there's some updates that we need to make there for sure, but not a terrible idea. I know that we did use the wiki for a while, but I think that we needed something more robust. Yes, that's true. The man pages are built via Sphinx. Yeah, great questions.
I see some, yeah.
Did we cover all our agenda items, or are we ready to move on to our next one?
That was our final agenda item. I did see a question about how we do integration testing. That's something we can talk about now if we'd like. That's something we can talk about in a test clinic. I think I'm going to leave that to Wayne to decide as I put you on the spot.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, Rick Nickel is asking about how we do integration testing. And since we have time, that's something we can talk about here, and it's something that we can do hands-on during a test clinic, whichever works for everybody.
Yeah.
But since you're our testing triage or our testing stream guy.
Oh, I would go to the hands-on. That sounds good.
All right.
Can you give a quick overview?
Yeah. So the current testing process is that we have a limited subset of tests that run on PRs. Basically, it's the fastest. About 90%, 80 to 90% of our test cases. That does include some of the integration tests that we have. And then we have periodic branch builds that run against the master branch. We have future plans for improving our test suite, just in general, kind of the end-to-end process. As we discuss tests just from a high level, they're really kind of three main test types. One of the things I've discovered about testing is that if you ask 3 developers what a unit test is, you'll get 4 different opinions. So it's helpful to at least start from a base definition so that we're all on the same page as far as when we say this kind of test, this is what we mean. So from our current perspective, our current test goals is we want to have 3 main types of tests: unit, function, and integration tests. So unit test is probably similar to the definition that you're aware of, where it's going to be testing one function. It's going to be testing in isolation. So it's not, it's not going to be hitting a disk. It's not going to be making a network access call or anything else like that. So it's very isolated and testing more of like the logic of SALT, what's going on internal to SALT, and just assuming that everything else on the periphery is doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's absolutely acceptable to mock things, add some test doubles and stuff like that, so you're not really hitting the disk or the network. The goal there is that we should be able to get a reasonable level of confidence that on PRs, we're not breaking code. It's not going to do any, like, the unit tests aren't going to check that the underlying system is sane, or that we're working across 10 different versions of some dependency. The unit tests don't give us that kind of confidence. That's where the functional tests start to come into play. So the functional tests are going to be similar to a unit test in that they're going to be narrow, they're going to be focused, but they will be making a network call or a disk call, or shelling out to some program. I can think of one example. I think it's it's something to do with files and attributes, and the current implementation, a previous implementation of our code, we're actually using parsing the man page, but there's another way to do that, but there's no like -- version flag that will give you the actual version that you want. So you have to do some kind of hocus pocus there. And that actually changed between versions and broke things. I know also Virtual Env did a similar thing where they changed the way that they were printing their version strings, and we were expecting 3 dots and they were changing it to 2 or something to that effect. So functional tests will get you there, because we can run those tests right against those. So they're still going to be relatively fast, because all they're doing is making a shell call, or dumping out to a file and reading from it, or something like that. So it's still going to be relatively fast, because you don't have to spin up a master, you don't have to spin up a minion to actually do that process. And then the third step that's more complete and robust would be the integration tests. And those are the tests that are testing end to end. We're going to spin up a master, we're going to spin up a minion, we're going to have proxy minions, the whole 9 yards, a full fleshed out SALT environment, whatever that needs to look like. Maybe it's a standalone minion for one particular case. Maybe it's a full fleet in another case. Whatever that looks like, that's what the integration tests are going to be. They're going to be slow. Some of them might be under a second or two to actually run the tests, but spinning up the master and the minions and doing whatever setup needs to happen is going to be much more intense. And for that reason, they won't be running on every PR, but they will be running periodically, whether that's multiple times a day or a couple of times a week. I'm not sure what that actually looks like right now, but from a high level perspective, that's going to give us more of those other like real world scenarios. One of the goals there is that when we do get bug reports and we do get issues, that we have a new test case added to our integration tests that replicate whatever it was that caused that issue. That way, that's kind of the ultimate regression testing, right? If we do that, then we don't have to worry about regression sneaking in, right? Because we're testing end to end. The only problem with that is it's going to take hours to run those tests, and that's just not feasible to run on every PR. So that will be running more periodically. But when those tests do break, then we'll have to stop and say, okay, halt the pipeline. Let's figure out why this test broke, what happened, what PR merged in a change. Can we add unit tests to cover this scenario so that we can catch these earlier in the process? So that's kind of the long-term goal. But as it is right now, we're pretty much just running unit tests and a few integration tests on PR, and then integration tests as well as the unit tests. So we run the full test suite periodically. I think it's either daily or a couple of times a day. But hopefully that's a good explanation of where we are today as well as where we want to be in the future.
Thank you. I'm going to try to attend that meeting on Tuesday. That sounds good. I'm really curious at what your methodology looks like. You know, so you'll demo. There'll be some hands-on in the meeting, probably, right?
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. The test clinics. You know, my default approach is that I pick one of our mini PRs, especially that we talked about on the support jam, that you know, they just don't have any tests, and currently we require or tests to merge a PR. So there are a lot of these ones that had been merged to other branches before we made that requirement. So my default approach is that, you know, if there's nothing else pressing, no other questions or PRs that people have questions about, that I'll go ahead and I'll just pick one of those and start working through the tests and actually writing tests for those. But, you know, if you've got questions, absolutely more than happy to discuss the questions. You know, if you've got your own PRs that you want to get in and you're just like, I don't really know how to test this or how to test this within SALT's test framework.
That's me. That's why I brought it up. Thank you.
Yeah, and absolutely, test clinics are a perfect place for that, because I can get, you know, very hands-on and can actually discuss it. I can walk you through starting tests or writing tests or whatever it is that we need to do to make sure that we know how to write tests and we get good, robust tests. Today's one was actually pretty interesting because we discovered a discrepancy in just a small thing, but it was good to be aware of that. The CGI.escape was deprecated with Python 3, I think, and removed in Python 3.8. So there's a warning message, and somebody put in a PR for that, and we ended up discovering that CGI escape and HTML.escape have slightly different behavior on whether they escape the quote character. And so working through that process of writing these tests actually exposed that difference. This was small, and in this case, it didn't really matter, that difference. But, you know, that's the kind of thing that tends to pop up as we work through things in the test clinic, is like, oh, there's this thing that we weren't really explicit about or really understood. And so being able to work through that's been super helpful. So definitely look forward to seeing you there on Tuesday.
Sounds great. Thank you, Wayne.
Awesome. Thank you. And we still have about 15 minutes, so if anybody else has random questions, comments, concerns, things to bring up, thought of other areas we need to improve documentation, floor is open.
I would like to bring a subject on. If you are acquainted with SALT for a while, you probably know that we are trying to switch to PyTest. That switch is bound to happen on the next weeks. There will be a blog post about it, namely to explain the reasons why we are changing, and also what changes when you run the test suite. So the common flags that you used to use and what you should use now, etc. So this is basically just a heads up before the blog post. It's published, and we actually switched to PyTest so that we have enough time for people hacking on Salt to be aware of our change to PyTest.
honestly didn't catch a lot of that because it's here.
Sorry, driving to pick the
You're
kids
cutting in and out.
from school. Is it better now?
Say some more words.
I will try to say something without getting cut by the network. Better?
A little bit. Go ahead.
We are trying to switch to PyTest. That switch will happen in the upcoming weeks. We will be making a blog post explaining why we are switching and also what changes when you try to run salt test suite, common flags that you used to use and how they reflect on PyTest and what are the PyTest flags, etc. This is just like a heads up before the actual blog post comes out and give enough time for people to be acquainted with PyTest if you're not yet acquainted with PyTest, and so that you are aware of our switch. There's a lot that is going to switch with PyTest, but this first stage is just mostly switching the test runner, and so we're trying to make it as less bumpy as possible for everyone. Anyway, it was just a heads up.
Yeah, and more to come about that, I think. And thanks, Pedro. We're excited about PyTest.
We are.
Yep. Yeah, you guys can't hear our enthusiasm on the call necessarily, but it exists. We are super excited about PyTest. It's going to be cool.
All right. Anything else that anybody wants to talk about? Can someone fill me in on what was discussed with regard to integration tests? I had a meeting conflict and came in late. Basically, somebody was asking how we do our integration tests, and Wayne gave kind of an overview of how that works. And then they're going to do some hands-on work with some integration testing in the testing stream on Tuesday. The other thing that you would have missed is we were talking about a lot of this open hour Eric has been focused on updates to the contributor guide and updates to documentation and how we're going to start working through some of those things. All right, here's a question. Is 3001.1 about to be released? Yes. Yes, it is.
Yes. Today, 3 p.m. Mountain, 9 UTC.
I think it was, where was it a couple hours ago in the process? Staging or something?
Yep, we're at the staging part and just running through that. So you guys will see some communication come out and that will happen by 3 p.m. today.
Yeah, and that's the only thing main date related or time sensitive related thing that we have right now is the release. All right, well, if that's everything, I will see y'all next week. As always, if you have, oh no, we have a question about the CI. Where is the 3001.1 branch located? Who can answer that question?
There isn't a branch for 3000.1, 3001.1.
Yeah, there'll be a tag, and you'll, yeah,
So
a release tag.
3001.1 is the master branch before we unfroze the code. We made an internal tag so that we could run manual testing and all of that stuff prior to release. And that all went well, so we are releasing today. And when we release, we will push the tag to salt repo, and that's where the 3001.1 version will live.
Yeah, and the tag will be in the communication today as we get ready for that release, and you will see that there. Sorry, I was having trouble getting off of mute. Computer issues today, so I hope that answers your question. All right, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice
If
first
you-
meeting.
Yep. Thanks for joining us. And if you want to stick around and talk about documentation, we'll be in the docs working group in about 6 minutes. So I will see some of you there and see y'all on Slack. Oh, and like I was saying, as always, if you have topics you want to talk about during these open hours, things you want to work through, please feel free to DM me and I'll get those on our agendas. The next 2 open hours we do have. Next week's open hour, the whole hour is going to be spent on talking through our release process, our cadence, our strategy. I kind of parsed through some of the Slack threads to find our frequently asked questions. So we're going to be basically answering all of those questions, recording that video, and creating documents so that when the same questions come up, we have a place to refer to. The following week, on the 20th, one of the open hour agenda items is going to be about working groups and basically which ones need to be active, which ones don't. Do we want to add new ones? How do we want to handle them moving forward? So keep an eye out for those as well. All right. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.